with Wales being home to the second largest tidal range in the world, this session will be a holistic exploration of why no tidal lagoon has been built in Wales to date and what's needed to kickstart the tidal range industry. We've carefully selected an esteemed panel to cover a range of perspectives, including past project experience, planned future developments, government policy, consenting considerations, and technological innovation. We encourage a multifaceted discussion of these issues among the panel, and of course we'll give you time from the floor to put your questions to the panel as well. And as mentioned earlier, we'll be using Slido, please, for your questions, and Jay, I say, is driving that. So, let me first introduce the panel to you, and let me start with, first of all, Jasper.
Is that my clue to speak?
Pardon?
That's my clue to speak, is it?
Yeah, just say a few words about your interest, Jasper, please.
Okay, yeah. Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be back in person, as it were, after 2 years. I'm still trying to get back in the hang of doing this sort of thing. It's been a while. My name is Jasper Roberts. I'm a Deputy Director in the Climate Change Portfolio area of the Welsh Government, and specifically I'm the SRO, Senior Responsible Officer for the Marine Energy Programme. This is something I've been setting up since about the autumn of 2019. I'm afraid much of the initial work was delayed by other responsibilities, legislation, but particularly by COVID. But we really got back into the swing of things in the autumn of 2019. My team is here. Mike Williams, some of you will have met. Jim Scopes, who's looking after the ports element of the programme, and S.J. Lewis is here as well. So they're all available to catch up and chat with you during the course of the conference as it goes on, as I am. I'm here today and tomorrow. You've heard the Minister's speech. There was a clear reference, a positive reference to the Marine Energy Programme there, the three elements, the ports, developing ports infrastructure to support flow, looking at the revenue support for tidal stream, and the third element, of course, is looking at the tidal range opportunities, the possibility of a lagoon project. There are ongoing discussions about barrages as well. I'm in touch with people like Western Gateway and the Liverpool City region. They're looking at different sorts of tidal range, but in Welsh Government we're primarily looking at the moment at the potential for a lagoon project. We ran the soft market testing about a year or so ago. We had a very good response to that. I think we gained a lot of useful information from that about the sorts of barriers that we've been facing. And briefly, the barriers fit into money, as you could well imagine. Money, consenting and planning, long-term finance, environmental issues, the appetite of the market, particularly the financial side of the market, and the role of the UK government, because, as you probably are well aware, there's no provision, there's no ring-fenced pot for tidal range in auction round 4. We lobbied hard to get a ring-fenced pot for tidal stream, and I'm pleased to say we've got that. We're also lobbying now for support for tidal range. It is expensive. The Welsh Government doesn't have the deep pockets of the UK Government, so we are looking for some UK Government financial support for tidal range. I'm sure we'll go more into the detail in the questions. There's a couple of sessions about environmental issues in particular coming up. I would mention, I think, the deep dive that the Minister referred to again in his speech, which is looking at issues around consenting. So there's a lot of work going on, moving things in the right direction. It's slower than we would have liked, I'm afraid, but we are trying to get the detail right, as sometimes in the past that has been part of the problem. So that when we do bring something to market, it will fly, if a tidal project can fly. Seaboats, perhaps.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jasper. Thank you very much. Anna, you are the Chief Executive Officer of TITEC, with very much a technology interest. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your company and your interests.
Yes. My name is Arne Kollansrud. I'm from Norway, and I'm CEO and also owner of representing the main shareholder in TITEC. We have developed a kind of innovative turbine solution for tidal range, because For tidal range, we realized that you need an optimized two-way production and also high pumping efficiency and at a high discharge. So putting all this together and combining Norwegian subsea competence and also hydropower competence, we have ended up with a turbine solution where you can have a much simpler turbine, ream-driven, permanent magnet, and you can turn the whole turbine in a turret so that it's always facing in the right direction to the flow. And we have done this through an EU-funded project and also some family funding and family friends funding. And to now we have the proof of concept through model testing, and we are heading for a pilot in using a redundant dry dock to upscale the whole technology, and it's patented, etc. So we have been into this industry for some time. Unfortunately, it has been this ever ongoing catch-22 situation with the not a working market, and then therefore it has been difficult to do the technology, and the learning curve hasn't yet started, even though Mr. Henry asked for it for several years ago. So, but Titech has been able to do that these last years, and now we are hopefully in the near future to do larger scale at this. Thank you.
So, Joannanton is the Executive Vice President of Communications at DST Innovations, so very much on the project development side of the industry. Joanna.
So DST are the organisation driving the consortium for Blue Eden in Swansea. We approached the project from a different angle, born out of our need to find a home for a battery gigafactory that was sustainable and had green power, and that's how we started the journey on the Swansea project. The way we've constructed Blue Eden is different to historical lagoon projects in that it was built on a privately funded commercial model with people at the centre, and the tidal lagoon almost falls out the bottom of it as the generation of energy. The thing that makes the tidal lagoon in Swansea such a great concept is the combination with our battery technology, which allows it to deliver the energy as and when is needed by the people, rather than it just being delivered at the point of generation. The project's taken, huge leaps forward. It will come against the same barriers that I'm sure other people in the room are facing with consenting and all of the things with Crown Estates and permissions. The way we've tried to deal with these issues up front is to control the things that we can actively impact. So things like finance, we've got 1.7 billion pledged already, with more interest being generated all the time to complete the project. We've already brought in some huge household names as partners. And we're looking to the next stage now to get that consenting and development underway.
Thanks, Joanna. And on that point, it naturally leads us into Kerry Morris from Natural Resources Wales, who, as a lead specialist advisor on marine regulatory approaches, is very much qualified, I'd say, to comment on the tidal range challenge with respect to the environmental impact. Kerry.
Thank you. Bore da pawb, a diolch am y cyfle I siarad efo chi heddiw. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kerry Morris from NRW. My role is, as you say, in regulatory approaches, so supporting NRW's marine licensing function. But NRW has a dual role, if you like, in that we are also the statutory nature conservation advisor. So we provide advice on the environmental impacts, such as protected sites, protected species, mitigation, monitoring, all things environmental impacts. But also we deliver the marine licensing function on behalf of Welsh Government. So hopefully I can answer questions on both sides of NRW's function. My background is also in marine mammal specialist advice, so I have served both roles within NRW, so hopefully I can cover all bases there.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you. And finally, Joannanton Jenkins is recently appointed as the chair of the Tidal Range Alliance. Joannan, you have a long history in Tidal Range with your work in Swansea in the past. Perhaps you could just elaborate on what you're up to today.
Diolch am y cyfle i ddod i siarad chi heddi. Yeah, my interest goes back probably 8 years when I joined the team at Tidal Lagoon Power, and it's great to see some colleagues and friends here today. And just looking back on that journey, I know we are today to talk about some of the challenges, but I think it's also appropriate that we look at some of the achievements. So we can all be encouraged by the fact that tidal range is consentable, is investable. The work that we do at the TRA, and as Martin said, I took over as chair January of this year. The work that we do at the TRA is to support the developers and the supply chain, which is effectively the membership of the TRA, to develop and fulfil their ambitions. And it's great to see some of those developers here today. The work that we've done most recently is to try and understand what power generation we can bring onto the system, or in Joanne's case, not on the system, onto the grid. Because if UK government is looking for something which can be developed very quickly at scale, and I'd suggest, given the challenges that we see in Ukraine and Russia at the moment, then that's rising up the agenda. Then the developers collectively, their projects, and there are 7 that they are looking at, can deliver something like 10 gigawatts of power within a 7-year construction period. Obviously, before that, there'd need to be consenting work to be done, and if we were to look at the Swansea project, then that's probably 3.5 to 4 years. So the membership, the development membership, can deliver power at scale very quickly when we all need that power now.
Okay, Joanne, thank you. And perhaps picking up on your point about reflecting on the past, it is important to do so, to find out if there are lessons learned from that particular experience on the Tidal Lagoon Power initiative. Why there has not been to date a lagoon built in Wales. And perhaps, Jasper, may I come to you first on that question from a Welsh Government perspective. Can you give insight from Welsh Government as to why you feel that no lagoon is here yet today?
I think and some of the things I touched on, and the things we picked up from the industry itself when we did the soft market testing, and the things that Joanne has referred to. I mean, the technical details are challenging, the consenting and planning are challenging. We've got to get these details right, but above all, the financial framework is challenging. I think one of the things that didn't help Swansea was the fact that the UK government was not prepared to put up a fund. Welsh Government is, as you heard from this morning's announcement on Morlis, we are making substantial sums available, but because the Welsh Government as a whole has to deal with social care, education, health, etc., our capacity to finance some of this stuff is challenging, to say the least. Now, we are looking at what the real costs are. We're going through a process of analysis of different types of lagoon options, looking at what the costs are, what's affordable, how we would fund it, different funding mechanisms. But it's challenging stuff. And before we bring a project to market, So we don't end up in the unfortunate position that Swansea found itself in with a project proposal that got a bit stuck. You know, we want to address these issues in advance. Whether the sad situation in Ukraine and the international need for energy security brings about a change of heart on the part of the UK government about faster, deeper funding for some of these renewable technologies will have an impact, that remains to be seen. It would be sad that it would come in such circumstances, but nevertheless, if it did happen, to have a pot for tidal range would be useful. But I stress, what we're trying to do is analyse the problems, understand the barriers and address them so that we bring forward a project that really will be able to happen.
And as part of that, again, going back to, it was a UK government decision that Swansea Bay did not proceed. If we look forward, do you see cooperation between Welsh Government and UK Government as an enabling collaborative venture for tidal range in the future?
Potentially, yes. I think collaboration is very important. It's absolutely the right way in which to approach it. But collaboration is a two-way street. It has to go both ways up and down the M4.
Right. Are you... do you think that can happen?
We always remain optimistic. That is what we're working towards. We have, at official level, we have regular conversations with Bays. Ministers have conversations. Ministers are in touch with UK government ministers, as indeed is the Scottish Government, and they will be in Northern Ireland.
Sure.
So the discussions are taking place. What we need to see is the outcome of those discussions in the form of some funding for tidal range.
Okay, thank you, Jasper. And Kerry, can I ask your perspective from the regulatory viewpoint on, one of these steps that we've got to get through? Historically, the Swansea Bay Lagoon again. Were there any blockers there that we need to address looking forward?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what's been said. I mean, tidal range projects are necessarily large and complex, and the environmental impacts are highly uncertain. There's a great deal of uncertainty on the environmental impacts. I wouldn't go into specifics on necessarily, particular challenges in terms of a particular project, but just to acknowledge that fact that there is a great deal of uncertainty. A tidal range project would be subject to several consents, several permissions, so there'd be a development consent order, there'd be a marine licence, a seabed lease from the Crown Estate, and probably a planning permission for the terrestrial elements as well. So it's a hugely complex process, and all of that consenting process needs to go through environmental or various assessments, including environmental impact assessments, habitats regulations assessments, water framework directive assessments, so it's complex. But I wouldn't say that was a barrier necessarily. We just need to acknowledge that complexity. And marine licensing essentially is a very permissive process in that if you can meet the bar for marine license, then a marine license may be granted. We can work together to overcome these obstacles. But in terms of specifics, obviously it depends on the location, it depends on the particular environmental considerations of where a project might be. But there's still such a great deal of uncertainty that we need to resolve a lot of that and need to address some of that, maybe at a strategic level at the early stages. And we do encourage developers to engage with NRW as early as possible for these discussions to take place, to scope out the issues and help to understand them and try and resolve some of these issues before we get to a planning application.
Okay, thanks. So Joanna, in that context, in terms of engagement with NRW, where are you at with your project and your programme?
We're engaging with NRW. Yeah, so that's
good to hear.
Yeah, that's more for my colleagues to answer in the technical questions and the backroom conversations that always happen with these huge projects. But collaboration is key to a project like this. And the nature of Blue Eden means that it's multifaceted. It's not just a lagoon. It's jobs, it's factories, it's research centres, it's port access, it's homes, it's energy generation, energy storage, data centres. There's an awful lot to Blue Eden which makes the project work, and the reason why it works is because it's a holistic approach to how we should live perhaps in the future. And with all of that, you need the right people on board, you need the right organisations on board in order to advise, because you can't be a specialist in everything. And that's what we've tried to do with DST, that we are merely a company that works in collaboration with others in order to achieve the project goal, rather than trying to do it all ourselves.
Okay, thank you. So, Anna, is the technology ready? You mentioned you're working on pilot studies,
Yes.
pilot demonstrations. Is it ready to go?
More or less, because we have the proof of concept. We have the hill chart for the DNA of the turbine, so we know that we can achieve. We have proved that we can substantially increase the production. We can also increase the pumping efficiency, so that we can respect the natural tidal zones within the estuary to reach the same level. And that's very important for the birds, etc. And also, I think everyone knows that the value for money aspect was pretty important in the Swansea case. With the energy prices now, it should be a no-brainer, but now it's extreme, of course. But also this increased production, his efficiency increase makes it almost compatible with the offshore wind. And either UK has to go with nuclear, or we need the base load. So tidal range can give that base load.
But it's not constant, is it?
No, it's not complete constant, but in a sequence with several.
It's predictable.
And we discussed this earlier today, Joannanton, and so it's an almost base load. So not
Yeah, it's
getting into
entirely
details.
predictable.
Yeah, it's more predictable, and for all the hydrogen production, you need the power from somewhere, and also low-head energy storage. If we can do one demonstrator project, then we could learn and show how we can make energy storage. That's the missing link for all the intermittent energy. One demonstrator project could give us the knowledge to develop 80%, 70 to 80% round-trip efficiency on energy storage in the ocean, offshore lagoons, or yeah. So we are now looking into using dry docks, etc., as a small demo. But of course, we are aiming to try to collect a consortium so that we can do the first demonstrator full-scale project.
Okay.
So that's the goal.
Okay.
Definitely.
Jasper, do you want to add anything to that at the moment, or I can move us on?
Just say, I mean, all the emerging technologies, that it's very interesting stuff, because, I mean, we're at the moment, certainly, we're sort of technology neutral. We're trying to get the framework in place.
Sure.
To let something go forward.
Yeah, okay. So, Johan, here, let me start with you here, in that, you know, you have a strong background in the industry in Wales, and with your role now in the Tidal Range Alliance, overlooking and representing in the Tidal Range Alliance a range of projects around the Welsh coastline, and indeed further north and south, because the UK is blessed with this really quite excellent tidal range capacity. What do you see from the Alliance? What are your asks in terms of kick-starting the industry to get going?
A couple of points there, Martin. In terms of the work the Welsh Government's doing in terms of the tidal range challenge, then that's great. in all fairness to Welsh Government, it's been very supportive. It certainly was supportive on the Swansea project and those other projects looking to be developed around the Welsh coastline, and we look forward to the announcement of that work, which, as I understand, is coming soon. In terms of Kerry's points, it is complex. They are complex. Some of them are fairly big beasts, but NRW is looking at all of those challenges positively with Welsh Government, and Lee's deep dive came up with some good work. So, you know, we're aligning the ambitions positively with, you know, with the organisations that we've got in Wales. In terms of Anne's point, in terms of the technology, then Anne's technology is at concept stage, but we know that the technology is there, and it is proven with some of the global players, whether that's Andritz or Voith or others. And I said previously that, you know, focusing on the positives, then these things are consentable. Well, you know, we can do this. It's just a matter of pulling together.
Yeah.
In terms of the work with the TRA, then it's hugely exciting that with the membership within the TRA, we have 7 developers developing their projects.
How many?
7.
Seven.
Yeah, and as you said, those are outside of Wales and within Wales, including DST, and the work that they are doing is pushing forward with their individual and collective ambitions to deliver about 10 gigawatts of power within a construction period of about 7 years. Would be of huge benefit.
And you know, picking up on the political point from earlier, are your constituent members also engaging with UK government as well as Welsh Government?
So in terms of the Tidal Range Alliance, I suppose we represent the industry collectively, but we encourage individual projects to do their own lobbying as well. And I suppose going back to some of the key themes about why we're here today to discuss why we haven't seen the Tidal Range project in Wales, then for me, there are 2 factors, I think, prime factors. One is those things you can see, and one thing those
One
things
is,
you can't.
sorry?
2 prime factors.
Yes.
UK government is those things you can see and those things you can't see. So those things we can see is that UK government still today, when it considers the value for money assessment, then it's comparing a fledgling industry with other industries delivering power for many years. And of course, we've got the added challenge of a tidal range project will deliver for in excess of 120 years, and nuclear is about 60 and offshore wind about 25.
Yeah.
So we're, as the value for money assessment is today, it's comparing apples and pears, and that just doesn't work. So those are the things you can see, and those are the things we have to change and influence, and it's great to hear that Jasper's saying that Welsh Government is trying to help make that change. But there's those things we can't see. And I haven't got the answer to this, but why did it take UK Government 2 years to kill the Swansea project after Charles Henry said, this is a no regrets decision? You know, so why 2 years to kill it off if it was so obvious? So one day we may understand why, but what's facing us at the moment is we've got a fantastic ambition within Wales, at least, to deliver these projects.
Yes.
We've got a range of developers determined and want to develop these. We've got the supply chain fully supportive of this, so we know that we can put a UK supply chain together very quickly. Where the main influence needs to be is around this value for money assessment.
Yeah, value for money. It comes back to. Okay, Jay, do we have any questions on? The screen's blank here at the moment. No. Well, while you resolve the technical hitch, I guess, Jasper, we're comes back to this question of value for money, tidal range challenge, and all the facets that we've touched on here. How do you see things playing out in the next year or two?
I think the point that Joan's made about the value for money analysis is a very good one. I mean, we are currently scoping out a comparative analysis between the different technologies. As you say, apples and pears, you're comparing different technologies at different points on the cost curve with different lifespans and so on and so forth. We've got to find a way of bringing all this back to a common financial comparator, and I think the answer will perhaps be quite different. The dead hand of the Treasury is on some of this stuff. Yeah. They look at the cash costs, and they take a dim view of those cash costs versus the cheaper forms of marine technology that are currently available and much more mature because they've been around longer, and therefore it's arguable that this is actually a false comparator. So as I say, we're scoping out a piece of work on different value for money. We also want to look at factoring in all the supply chain benefits that we get from the marine sector as a whole, obvious potential supply chain benefits in tidal range, but there will be particularly the stuff the Minister referred to on ports and supporting offshore wind. There will be huge supply chain benefits that if you do that broad cost benefit analysis across the economy as a whole, you get a very different answer about the value of these renewable technologies. Right. I don't think the UK government does that.
Okay. That's better. Thanks, Jane. Thank you, Jasper. Okay, so let's take some questions from the floor. And first one up here is from Tim Carter. And Tim says, what consenting lessons have been learned from the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon application in 2014? And how are the learnings being applied to the next project? So, lessons learned. Kerry, do you want to comment on that at the start, to start with?
In terms of consenting lessons learnt, it was a big learning curve for all of us, I think, the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon application. There were, like I say, a lot of environmental uncertainties over the environmental impacts, and we were all sort of learning as we went along, really, in this project being the first of its kind. In terms of what we could do, what we've learned from that and what we could do better sort of up front for future projects, we would, again, like I say, strongly encourage developers to engage with NRW as early as possible, so that we could allow a systematic, comprehensive and rigorous scoping of the effect. But also, I would really encourage some investment in a strategic evidence gathering process to answer some of these questions up front before we get to the stage of an application. Once an application has been made, it's on a fixed timeline, and time is limited to undertake these assessments. So any work that we can do up front, any investment that can be made now in terms of resolving some of those environmental uncertainties would be highly beneficial to the industry. So things like predictive impact assessment models could be considered and agreed before we got to the stage of an application. So that's something that we've learnt from our experience with Swansea Bay. It just that message of please engage as early as possible, and please let's try and resolve some of these issues at an early stage.
Okay, and the next question here is a follow-on from that, really, and it's perhaps leading, and you may not be able to comment, but the question here is about, is there anywhere specifically that NRW would consider where a project is more feasible, given the area covered by the designations and the uncertainty around impacts, or is it too early?
It's too early, and I think that's part of the aim of the Tidal Lagoon Challenge, is to identify constraints. Yes, a great deal of Welsh waters is covered by designations, so there are special areas of conservation and special protected areas. But that's not necessarily a complete blocker to consenting. It's something that has to be considered, and we can work around that, and we can find ways to mitigate, and we can find ways to work within those designations. So it's certainly not a complete blocker. We haven't identified areas, and obviously there are other constraints as well as the environmental constraints, so that the technical feasibility and things that are well beyond my remit to consider. So no, we haven't considered any particular areas, but we are looking to work with the Tidal Lagoon Challenge to support that.
Okay. Johan, from experience, any comments on the environmental side?
Far too clever for me.
Yes, Arne.
Yes, I think it's really urgent. If we don't start now, we don't have the habitats to protect.
Yeah.
We are losing them. So you have to do something and start the learning curve. I mean, we are optimizing for lower rotational speed on the turbine to have increased fish friendliness, for instance, versus production. We can use acoustics to protect and do all these things that, I mean, they have a perfectly working plant in Larance in France, and we should definitely get started and also learn related to the environmental things. Doing on the mitigation pumping production scheme, you are distributing the pressure drop that is urgent for the fish to avoid, and you can distribute the pressure drop on the longer time frame. It's a bit technical, but all of these things has to be done. First, we are now doing it with artificial sensors, etc., but then fish, and then we should definitely get started with the demo,
with the project
demonstrator. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have to.
Looking, sorry, Martin. Looking at the screen, and Tim makes a relevant point. No monitoring evidence until we have a demonstration project.
Yeah.
We have to build one of these things.
Yeah,
or a number of these things.
And from my own experience
for
in Tidal Stream, I was involved in a project which was about test and demonstration.
Yeah.
But it was on a smaller scale than something like this, which is, the impacts are significantly greater.
And there's nobody in this room whose ambition is to damage the environment. We want to enhance the environment, all of us.
Absolutely.
And look, we appreciate that it has to be done considerately and safely. But
I go back to
project.
What I said in my intro about the conservation and the user groups working collaboratively to make sure it works for everybody. Jasper, you wanted to come in?
Just very quickly, the issue of site selection is very important, and all the sites around the coast of Wales may behave differently. The environmental factors will be different. Swansea Bay, in some respects, has a much more complex marine environment with so many estuaries and fish spawning areas. It may have a very different set of issues from another area. So we're giving very careful attention at the moment to the site selection methodology, because if we bring forward a Tidal Lagoon challenge, we may want to do it with some sort of pre-site selection work already done, with an eye on the consenting and environmental implications. NRW are represented on our programme board in the person of Rian Jardine, so we have direct input in that respect. We work very closely with people like my colleague Alice Teague, who runs the Marine Policy Division, which again has the policy responsibility for consenting. But I mean, picking up again on one of the other questions, which was anonymous, and I think I couldn't quite read it, but it looked as if it was going to ask about delay. And it's not so much delay. These things take time. They are, as others on the panel have said, these things are complex. We've got to get them right up front, not have something on the stocks that can't go forward because we haven't got the details sorted. So what we're working on is exactly that sort of detail: environmental, financial, technical, site selection, all those sorts of things.
It's making sure that you have the right questions to ask, presumably.
Yes, and I think that there's a huge amount of learning from Swansea and other things, and the conversations we've had with the industry, and this, I'm sure the discussions that will go on here will all be part of informing that process.
And there's been a lot of discussion about the Tidal Range Challenge. I mean, are you able to give a comment on what sort of time frame you expect that to move forward at?
We're very close to being able to undertake the next round of discussions with the industry. We're waiting for some ongoing ministerial discussions to be concluded. I won't anticipate the outcome of those. You heard the commitment this morning from the Minister, who a commitment shared also with Julie James, the Minister herself for climate change. You will have the First Minister here tomorrow. There's a strong commitment to doing this work. You'll see that the language at the moment is about exploring the possibilities, because that's what it is. We've got to work out affordability, we've got to work out technical feasibility, etc., etc. And that is what we're engaged in. But I think we're fairly close to being able to start our next round of discussions with the industry on the next level of, the next layer of detail, as it were.
Right, okay. Question which arises here and is an interesting one in that it links technology that we're talking about in tidal range to the nuclear industry. And the question says, do you think, panel, that tidal range should be included in the nuclear RAB? I don't understand that acronym, sorry.
Regulated asset base, I think.
Regulated asset base.
It's a
financing model currently going through Parliament. Who'd like to take that one first? Jasper first.
That may be one for me initially, and the answer is yes. We are talking to BEIS about it.
Right.
It requires legislation. It's not devolved legislation, but it's one of a number of possible financing models. So we are discussing extending the eligible range of it to include tidal range.
Because of its longevity, I suppose? Is it?
Longevity, scale, all sorts of things.
Right. Okay, good. You want to...
Yeah, with Jasper, definitely, and it's something that we've discussed with, as the TRA discussed with BEIS recently, and are currently writing to Greg Hans to try and influence a meeting with him, because it takes away so much of that value for money. Then you start comparing apples with apples.
Okay. So, what sorry, oh no, go on, please carry on.
It's actually a paradox. Looking at it from Norway, I mean, we have all this hydropower. Until a year ago, we hardly paid for the electricity compared to Europe. Now we're paying a lot because of the cable to UK. No, but anyway, it's a paradox that Swansea was rejected, the CFD, on £92 per megawatt, and if you are building a project now, you can have a higher price without the CFD. So with the CFD, you would lose money, and the government would earn them. So now it's more natural to invite the market and the investors to look at this. And if you listen to Bloomberg and etc., they predict that the high energy prices are not going to drop after the Ukrainian disaster, but it will still last for a long time. And it was high even before Putin went mad.
So, Joanna, what's the perspective of your investors then, as a longer-term prospect? You know, clearly with the Blue Eden project, they've come forward. Are they really confident? How?
Yeah, I think it's because it's done the lagoon is done in conjunction with other elements on site, which start earning straight away.
Right.
So the actual ROI of the project is brought forward significantly.
Yeah.
To within what's deemed within, you know, say, ROI for, say, a pension fund or things.
Yeah.
It's much easier to get an investable project when you're working within those same time parameters as what they're used to. So by incorporating other elements into projects that work in conjunction and benefit each other, all of a sudden the emphasis goes off needing help from the public purse and is more commercial entity from the start, rather than it relying on the government to bolster the start of a project. That's how we started Blue Eden, by looking at different elements and also looking at the human element of it as well, because it's quite easy to forget when we're looking at these very technical, large developments. The environment is important, and the technology is important, and the energy is important, but ultimately everything needs to work in harmony, and for it to be sustainable, you need the investment in the people as well, because all of these new technologies that are coming through need people in order to carry on developing them, and there's a huge shortage of people within the UK and across the globe in these new technologies. And how are we going to get these people skilled and ready for this new wave that's come in of new technologies? And how are you going to forge the future in that way? So the way it was constructed was to try and create a commercial model that is self-sustaining, with energy being produced but consumed on site in a way that is sustainable and is also gives you fuel security on site as well. So it's that holistic approach, not just seeing it as we're creating energy, what can we get for it?
Yeah, yes, I think I can see that. It's that holistic, adding commercial value beyond just generating electricity.
Yeah.
That perhaps is where the industry has an important part to look forward.
Yeah, I think education and working with universities and things is vital, and also working with trying to train these next engineers, these next scientists, these next environmental experts through, so that we can really, well, put Wales on the map as like the centre of excellence for this, and we can then export our skills across the world.
Okay. Right, here's a question for you. Without asking you to elaborate or display any political motivations personally, question here is, what is the impact of Brexit on tidal range projects, if any? Jasper?
I mean, it impacts in different ways. A lot of the work we're doing at the moment is internal Welsh Government work, so that's going on with our own resource within Welsh Government. But if you look, for example, we're not in the next round of structural funds. The More Life funding came from the previous round of structural funds. That stopped.
Yeah.
The UK government has been totally unclear about how it should replace that. In spite of the promises made during the referendum campaign, we're no further forward in understanding what funding will be available. And that, I think, connects back to the point I made about funding previously in terms of the auction rounds and so forth. So I think there are other maybe intangible benefits about people moving around, coming to help us, international movement of companies and so forth. They're much softer issues, but the biggest one, obviously, is the loss of access to structural funds.
Yeah. And that's been a really significant impact, hasn't it, in bringing marine renewable energy forward to where it is today.
And as this is such a technologically groundbreaking area, all sorts of things, R&D, investment in projects, all gone.
What about Project Horizon, though, and the continuation of that?
We're working on that. We're trying to see what we can do there between the three countries. I still think of Cornwall as another country. Ireland, Wales and Cornwall.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Any supply chain points to raise on?
The only comment from me, Martin, I remember the conversation about having homegrown green energy at scale when Brexit was mooted, and that argument more recently has become a lot stronger. So bringing homegrown green energy at scale is now more important than ever. I don't pretend for 1 minute to understand the consequences of Brexit as a whole. What I do understand is that we need power to support our economy.
It will be interesting. Sorry, I'll come back to you in a second. It'll be interesting to see how, as the Minister mentioned, the rapid revisitation of the UK government's energy strategy, and see if anything comes out of that which is relevant to this at scale. We'll see. Anna?
To what you said, it's not about offshore energy versus tidal range versus tidal stream. We need all of it.
Yeah.
So, had to start.
I think that's right. I think across our industries, in the broader renewable sense, we would say there is no single silver bullet.
But what is really interesting now is that the investors, the larger companies like the EPC, and they also see this now. And 8 years ago, Titec, we were studying a combination of a flood defense and tidal lagoon in Thames to have the Thames barrier last for a longer time. So we also look at this combination. But as soon as you put, of course, as soon as you put two elements together, then you increase the risk for each of them. But I think you're doing a great job on that side. So it's very interesting to see that it's possible to build up a tidal range project. It's not only a tidal range project, but the holistic commercial side. We're also looking at making small green batteries, having premium pricing because of the green effect. Let's take a redundant dry dock. It's no more in use, and we can use it for supporting EV charging station or something like that. Just to start, and we learn something from that, and then a full demonstrator, and yeah.
Okay, right. Thanks, Arne. Thank you. I think this question we've touched on already, but Johan, perhaps you can, from your Tidal Range Alliance knowledge. Tim James asks, what's the scale of the opportunity in terms of megawatts installed? You talked about gigawatts earlier, for North Wales, South Wales and the South West.
So on that one, Tim, for those members that are looking to develop projects within the TRA, between the two projects in North Wales, the Swansea project and the West Somerset project, then that comes in at about 5.5 gigawatts. But look, we know from that work done previously, within if somebody was to pick up a Cardiff Lagoon, there's about 2.5 gigawatts there again. There is talk of somebody looking to resurrect a tidal barrage type project across the Severn, and that would run into gigawatts. So the ambitions are there, the scale of opportunity is there. It's just about getting that first one in the water.
Okay. Sorry.
Very quickly on that.
Yes, of course, Jasper.
The Tidal Lagoon Challenge we're currently looking at probably would bring forward a single project initially. That might be up to 1 gigawatt. The scale is something we're modelling at the moment. But of course, that in a sense is just the start. I've got a piece of paper here from the documents we've developed over the last year or so. They're talking about 3 Welsh lagoons by 2015 with an installed capacity of 5 gigawatts. I mean,
by
2050.
Right.
This is long-term stuff, and that's why some of the questions about the pace of development. The lagoon stuff is taking time, inevitably. The marine energy program as a whole has the flow element and the tidal stream elements, which will come on stream faster. But sticking with the lagoon stuff for the moment, we are modelling potential scale into the future.
Do you think in the context of that time frame, therefore, that there is a danger that tidal lagoon development will be overshadowed by offshore wind, for example, both fixed bottom and floating, or do you still see a place for tidal range in that overall energy mix?
I think, as you said, it's not about one or the other, it's about all of them. If we can make them work, it's about all of them.
Yeah. But government, without being disrespectful, can be quite short-term in its perspective, just simply because of the election cycle. And we're talking about, as you say, a 2050 timeframe. Once we start, we need to keep the ball rolling.
Absolutely. If the Welsh Government is going to put money on the table, the developers and the finance people have to know that it's there and it's there for the life of the project.
The
and it's
investors need the
understood.
confidence, don't they?
Yeah, they need the confidence, and that's what we're working on. We're looking at potential funding that could span, say, 15 years in any given case. Now, that spans at least 3 electoral cycles. This is not unprecedented in government. Ministers, I think, find it difficult. Treasury officials find it difficult. But there's a good example in the waste infrastructure programme where grants were committed up front in the procurement process for up to 25 years. And that gave the developers the confidence to proceed, and it gave the bankers the confidence to invest. And that, I think, is very important.
Okay, any final comments? Johan, anything to add?
No,
Your ambition, your hope for the future?
Just one point really that I think Anne mentioned was predictability, and you reinforced that but importantly by having lagoons north and south, because of the tide time difference.
Synchronize.
You don't quite get to base load, but you can generate for most.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Close to 24/7.
Yeah.
Then
Excellent.
having these dotted along the coastline, then you're close to base load.
Okay. Thank you.
And with energy storage as well.
Yes.
So making sure that the energy storage is there
Yes.
in a more sustainable way. So something like the sodium battery technology that
Yes.
we'll be putting in Swansea is far more sustainable. It's cheaper and enables that pull of electricity as and when, and energy when you need it, rather than when it's generated.
I would say, from what I can see over the last 2 or 3 years in particular, we're seeing a real swing to energy integration. And that's the key. There is not, as I say, a technology which is a silver bullet. It's all of them, but it's about integration with systems, with hydrogen, etc. Kerry, any final comments to?
Again, just to reiterate that we do strongly encourage early engagement to discuss the environmental issues and try and resolve some of the uncertainties up front. There was a comment, we didn't quite get to it, but querying, how can we address these uncertainties until we get a project in the water?
Yep.
We adopted an adaptive management approach in our consenting and our advice, so we're very much open to learning through doing and learning through a phased approach, so learning from what's in the water and scaling up from that if that's in any way feasible. So we're open to a pragmatic and flexible approach as much as possible, as we took with the Modelised project, which was also full of a lot of uncertainties, but we were able to resolve that through this flexible approach, and we would encourage the same with the tidal range sector.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. Joanne, anything final to say?
No, it's a long path that we've all got to go on, but it's
Please
exciting.
carry on with it.
Yeah, it's good, and it's events like this that enable everyone to get together in one room and share stories and share knowledge and make connections, and we're all trying to do the same thing.
Excellent, that's what we try and do. Anna?
I'm thinking of the Industrial Revolution. If you are really looking back, Mr. Arkwright and the cotton factories, it was right here because of the tidal head and the rivers and the transportation possibilities. And then you had I call that the hydropower 1.0 with the water wheels. And then you have the 2.0 is the centralized production distributed. And then now we're on the doorstep to 3.0, and Jim O'Toole in Mostin said that yesterday, that actually the offshore wind industry started right there, and now it's time to start this hydropower 3.0, I think.
Hydropower 3.0.
So
Okay. Thank you. Jasper, anything?
Just to, I'm aware that some people in the industry are a little frustrated at the pace at which the tidal range work is going, but I stress the other stuff is going on about ports and flow and tidal stream as well. We're doing it as quickly as we can. We want to get it right, and we can continue this conversation with the delegates as we go
over the next
couple
few
of days,
days,
and I can answer points of detail. And
Well, we'll clearly ensure that it remains on our radar screen as it is, because there's so much opportunity there.